Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for getting up early and wanting to learn about this subject and support the people that are here. My name is Jordan Pease. I'm the co-producer of this event. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce my co-producer, Lauren Trantham. But it fell upon me to just welcome you this morning, encourage you to learn as much as you can, get to know all these exhibitors that are here today, obviously get to know fellow attendees. This is really about networking and coming together and supporting and learning about this cause. So again, we're so glad you're here. The hardest part about marketing these kinds of events is the marketing, is getting people to come. So I'm especially glad and appreciative to see this room full of people. A few more people are parking. We have about 210 pre-registered, I believe. So we didn't want to delay the program anymore because we got a packed schedule for you. And with that, please give a big round of applause for my co-producer, Lauren Trantham. Lauren Trantham, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. All right, welcome everybody. It is truly a dream come true to see so many people here. So as Jordan said, my name is Lauren Trantham. I'm the founder and executive director, of Ride My Road. We're a local anti-trafficking organization. And I'm also on staff at Epic Project, so I wear two hats, and both of our tables are over there. You're going to learn a lot more about both organizations this week. And I want to go over a couple of logistics. So you guys should have all received your programs. That has your speaker bios, the schedule, and then right up front it has our summit agreements. And I want to just go over those. We want to set the tone for the next couple of days. We're going to be talking about some difficult things, and it's nice if we're all on the same page of how we're dealing with it. So the first agreement is to be kind. And that is really to be kind to yourself. There it is. Take care of yourself. Like I said, this is not the easiest of topics, and so if you need to step out, have some hot tea, give yourself a hug, whatever it is, just please take care of yourself. The next one is to stay curious. There's a lot that we don't know. Even us experts, or people who are experts at something, we always have something to learn, and so stay curious today. Set an intention to listen as best you can to our presenters. Next up is to have courage. I think you already have courage because you're here. You're confronting the realities of this issue. You're taking the time to look at something that's fairly dark, and so you already have courage, and I want to commend you for that. I want you to feel proud for that. Also remember to look for beauty. Some of the stories are sad, they're hard, but there's so many triumphs to celebrate. There's so much good. I mean, the fact that you guys are here today, that's a beautiful thing. So continue to look for beauty over the next couple of days and support one another. This is a safe space. I come and I speak at events like this all the time, and I never know if there's a survivor in the room. You don't know if there's a person at your table that has experienced something, and so it's good to just take care of each other and assume that, we've all had traumas and we can all support each other through that. And then you might notice that our logo is a tiger. And it's not an accident that I chose a tiger to represent Disruptors Summit. And that's because in the wild, tigers are known for taking down predators much larger than themselves. And when we're tackling human trafficking, that's quite often what it feels like. I meet people all the time like, we're never gonna stop human trafficking. Or we hear things like, it's the oldest profession. You're never gonna stop that. And it feels like it's so much bigger than us. And we want to be like tigers, quite simply. We can take down things that are bigger and darker than how we feel sometimes. Thank you. So be sure and wear your stickers and your pins and be the tiger. I would make you guys roar, but I don't know if we're ready for that yet. Maybe at the end. Some more logistics. You guys will notice your passports. You guys have passports, and I'm actually going to go, I got to fast forward here a little bit to this slide. I'm jumping ahead a little bit because I'm about to introduce Rebecca Bender, but Rebecca Bender said if we want to stop human trafficking, we need to support our agencies and our community members who are actually supporting our vulnerable populations. And so we don't want you guys to just pass by the tabling agencies and just consider them as tablers. We are here to celebrate them. That's one of the main reasons that we are here. And so it's really important to us that you guys take the time to visit each table and have a conversation. Find out what these people are doing in the community and how they're helping vulnerable populations, because I guarantee you they are preventing trafficking when they support those populations. And so when you visit their table, you have a conversation, they're gonna give you a stamp on your passport, and once you've been to all 16, you can drop your passports in this box over here. We have our very own Vanna White, Jordan White. Be sure to write your names on them, because you can't win anything if you don't write your names on them. And at the end of day 2 tomorrow, we're going to be giving away some prizes. We got some really great stuff donated from Harry and David, and Ashland Hills Hotel has donated a night stay here. So you'll also see that you have some raffle tickets. The raffle tickets are really for you to use if you feel like you learned something. If something you hear today really impacts you, that's worth a raffle ticket. So write your name on half, drop them in the box, different box. Thank you, Jordan. And after every break, we're gonna be giving away a book. Some of them are written by survivors, some of them are just great educational books on this topic. So every time you come back for a break, if you have raffle tickets in there, you're gonna have an opportunity to win one of those books. And your journals. We're going to be asking you guys to use your journals today. Please remember to bring them back tomorrow. You'll be using them tomorrow as well. And then, okay, I'm going to start to talk about Rebecca Bender now. So let me get my tissues. First of all, Ride My Road, you know, you hear all the time like, oh, I'd never be here without you. I never could have done this without you. But that's a literal statement when it comes to Ride My Road. If it were not for Rebecca Bender, I would not be here. This would not be my job. I would not have dedicated my life to this. I'm going to tell my story tomorrow so you guys can hear all about it. But just know that, again, never would have been here without Rebecca Bender. She believed in me since day one. We've been in operations for over 8 years. We've raised over $400,000 for survivor-led programs. And I photographed, thank you, photographed almost 100 American survivors of human trafficking, and almost every single one of those survivors was through Rebecca's network. So I can't even explain what she means to me. And again, this quote from her that I pulled from her TED Talk. Rebecca speaks a lot, and she does a lot all across the country, including training law enforcement, and you guys can see her bio here in your book. But when she gave her TED Talk and she said this, it really planted a seed for me. So not only is Rebecca why Ride My Road started, Rebecca is why you guys are all here today. Because I heard this and I thought, we can do this. We can create solution for the needs in our community. So Rebecca's TED Talk is the whole reason we have this conference today. Most anti-human trafficking conferences across the country are set for service providers. I don't know of any other anti-trafficking conference that is for community members. So this is really innovative. And this all comes from Rebecca and this statement. So we have a lot to be grateful for. So without further ado, Rebecca Bender, our keynote speaker. Welcome.
Oh man, I was crying. I would say Lauren is the type of activist and fire starter and go-getter that if you just say one thing, she's gonna run with it and do amazing things. So it's not just those of us out, doing work. It's like it takes all of us jumping in and doing something. And so you are the epitome of jumping in and doing something. I had to do very little. You just ran with everything. She's so great. One of the things before I totally get started on my presentation too that I thought of when Lauren was talking just now about ending human trafficking. I think sometimes it can feel like, where do you begin? How do you eat an elephant, drop in the ocean? And one of the things I like to remind myself is 30 years ago, our nation thought about smoking in a very different light than it does today, right? Any of you who are around back in the day, I know I was, but you could remember like a doctor or nurse literally smoking in the room with you while they're checking the chart. You're like, oh, how's your cancer? You're like, what is happening? You would never see that today. Or on the flight, I haven't seen one in a while, but there used to be actual ashtrays still on our airlines, right? Could you imagine just puffing away and up in the sky? Like, it's crazy to me. And it took everybody doing a lot of something to shift the way a nation saw a health crisis. And I think we have an ability to do something similar today when it comes to ending human trafficking, when it comes to ending the exploitation of vulnerable people. We can look at this topic really differently. When the issue of smoking, it took so many people. It took innovative ways to sue states for different medical treatments at the cost that the state was incurring. It took whistleblowers that actually had their lives threatened. A lot of whistleblowers from the tobacco industry lost their families, had bricks thrown through their windows. It took activists laying out on streets, showing the number of people who died a day from cancer. It took everybody doing something to come together and over decades shifted the way a nation saw an issue. And so I think we're a part of that today. I think we're a part of being able to all of us do our part to shift the way that a nation sees this issue. Okay, there's so many people in here who have heard my story a million times. Tom Perez being one of them. He could probably tell you my story for me if he wanted to come up. And so I was challenged to bring something a little bit different. So if I'm a little bit, not in my groove yet, it's because the first time I've done it in this order. I'm going to share a video from 2006. This was a news broadcast that came over CBS 12. 2006, how many years ago is that? Math people in the room. That was quick. I think that deserves an extra raffle ticket. 18? That was fast. Okay. Well, while we're figuring that out, I will share that out of all the books that are being given away, obviously I think they're all amazing. I've read, I think, almost all of them, but I would also love to give a shameless plug to Wendy Barnes' book, And Life Continues. Wendy Barnes is one of the best writers I have ever read. She is such a compelling writer. I was floored reading her book. I was just drawn in from the beginning. And Wendy's done incredible work. She works with Dignity Health. They're a health organization that helps anti-trafficking efforts and does tons of stuff. But she's just a phenomenal writer. If you're the one that wins that book, you are really in for a treat. She's a really, really good writer. Wish I had a joke ready. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. There we go. So this news broadcast, in 2006, federal investigators raided our home in a suburb in Dallas, Texas, called Denton. And you could imagine the kids were in school, and this comes out on the news, that what you just saw. And immediately we started getting phone calls from the parents of our children's friends, wondering what was going on. And we had to take, especially one little boy who was in middle school, we had to take him out of school that day and relocate him to get kind of away from everything that was going on. You can imagine 18 years ago, some of the language that you probably heard would never be used today. And the way they showed all the victims' faces on TV. And I just want to share with you this because I'm going to show you a follow-up that they did just a couple of years ago, as we can see the drastic difference then in reporting that awareness has been able to make in how we talk about the issue and how it shapes the way people see it, the victims that are involved, the children that are involved. It's very, very different now, thankfully, but it takes a lot of work. So my story real quick, I grew up here in Southern Oregon. I'm born and raised Cave Junction. Everyone know where that is? Yeah. When I speak in other places, they're like, oh, is Oregon a city in California? Like, nope, we're an actual state. But most people have no clue where Cave Junction is. Clearly, some people don't even know where Oregon is. But I grew up down in Cave Junction. My dad worked at Rough and Ready Lumber Mill. He pulled green chain there. My grandpa worked there. Both my uncles. We grew up small, very small town, clearly lumber family. Just to date myself and give you a little bit of an idea, don't judge me or my family, but my dad literally had a bumper sticker that said, save a logger, eat an owl. Okay, if you remember the spotted owl era, that's that's how I grew up. So my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She taught aerobics on the side. I just grew up real small town, skipping rocks on the river, taking a salt shaker out to the garden to pick a tomato. I was an only child. That's my cousin on the right, but I was an only child. And so I grew up, doing what lots of kids do when you're out in the country. And I had a lot of fun running through fields, letting cows suck on my fingers out at the farm, getting eggs in the morning. And I just grew up with a pretty normal childhood. But when I was 9, my parents divorced. And it was a pretty ugly divorce. My dad started drinking real heavy, ended up falling deep into alcoholism, lost his job, lost the home. My mom went from being a stay-at-home mom working kind of side jobs to now having to work a couple jobs to make ends meet. And she moved us to the big city of Grants Pass so that there would be more options for her. And I can remember her renting houses near whatever school that I was going to so that I could walk myself to and from school every day, to and from practice, to and from any, extracurricular activity. And so even though that was kind of the extent of my trauma, was really just being alone all the time. Or when I'd go home to Dad's, we'd drive to the bar and I'd sit in the car for a few hours, or sometimes he'd sleep through the whole time I was there, and I'd, at 10, trying to figure out what we were going to eat for the weekend. And so, it's still there's still little T traumas there, right? Where I grew up feeling really unimportant, really unwanted, really literally starved. I can remember often being hungry. And that created something in me where there was still I needed to figure out how to do it all on my own, was kind of what I learned at a very young age. But by the time I got to high school, I learned that, where do I point this? There we go. I figured it out. Up here works. But I learned that by the time I got to high school that if I just said yes to everything, then I would never have to be alone. Yes to every sport, yes to every extracurricular, yes to every boy, yes to every party. But then I'd never have to be alone. I wouldn't have to go home by myself and figure out dinner at 13. I wouldn't have to figure out how I was going to walk to soccer practice or get to daily doubles. I wouldn't have to figure out who or and how I was going to get cleats or shin guards. Just trying to figure it out all on my own most of my childhood. And I learned that if I just became the yes girl and was real funny, then I could be around people all the time and I wouldn't have to be alone. And that worked really well for me for a while. I was an honor roll student. I graduated high school a year early. I got accepted at Oregon State. Go Beavers. Nobody. Okay, it's a handful of us. And I was really excited to move out of my small town. I'm sure no one here has ever felt like that when you were younger. We all come back eventually, though. Isn't that funny how that works? But I was so excited to get out of my small town and get out of GP. But that summer, I got pregnant, and I had to make a really tough decision. Next slide. To keep my daughter, and I ended up staying in Grants Pass, unenrolling, giving up my dorm room. And I went to Rogue Community College and stayed home and had my little girl. And I'm so glad I did, because she is an amazing young woman. But my friends who had gone off to the U of O, okay, now the Ducks people can cheer. I know we have the Civil War in here. My friends who had gone off to the U of O, by the time I had my daughter, they'd moved out of their dorm room freshman year, had got an apartment, and they had an extra room. And they said, hey, you should come up and visit. You should move up here and get out. And I thought, okay, finally the tables have turned for me. I'm going to move to Eugene with my friends, have this extra room. And things started to take a downward spiral when I got up there. I had a lot of those same old feelings resurfaced, feeling really alone, really unimportant. Now I was the girl, on campus with the kid. Not a lot of people with kids 24 years ago, right? I felt really alone. I didn't have the support of my family or my friends to help with anything. And so even though you don't articulate that when you're 18 years old, due to some vulnerabilities in my childhood, I'm feeling like no one says that when they're 18, right? But in hindsight, with therapy, I've realized that those are the moments that I started to have that kind of anxiety that you just can't put your finger on as a young person. And that's when I met the most amazing guy. He was funny and charming. He didn't care that I had a baby. Matter of fact, he made everything about us and we and ballpark, at Chuck E. Cheese and play dates at the park. And I just thought, finally, there's someone here to help me figure this out. Finally, someone that I don't have to do this on my own, that I can figure out life with, that they seem to be successful. They drive a nice car. They have nice clothes. They live in a nice apartment. So surely they must have a job, right? And so I trusted that this person was going to help me and that they didn't care. And finally, I got to have this little family for, I think, broken 9-year-old me, but also I really wanted for my little girl. And so after 6 months of dating me, getting to know my hopes and my dreams and my fears, and also slowly starting to push my boundaries that I didn't recognize at the time, he invited me to move in with him. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to get married, have a white picket fence, dog named Pepe. Everything was going to be great. And as I was packing up my apartment, he said that his job was relocating him to Las Vegas. And I thought, well, every good woman follows her man, right? That's what we're taught. And so I begged to go. And I like to point that out because I think when we picture human trafficking, we picture kidnapping. We picture stranger danger. We picture the white minivan that's, trying to offer puppy and a candy, and we teach our kids to look for those things, all of which we should also. But we definitely don't think about what to do when your boundaries are being tested. What do you do when you simply feel uncomfortable in a party when you're 17, 18? We tend to pull the line back as parents to only teaching stranger danger emergency moments. But what about all these other steps along the way? What do you do when you're at a college party and you don't feel comfortable, but you don't feel like you can leave because your friends are there and she's with that person that she really likes? So you sit, and you take the flirting or the hand on the thigh that you really don't like, and you sit because you feel uncomfortable and you don't know what to do. Are we talking to our teens about those moments where just the little things start to begin? How do we pull that back? So anyway, I begged to go. And the day that I arrived in Las Vegas, he took my daughter. We left him with a family member who I had met lots of times. You think normal progression of a relationship, you meet each other's families. So to me, that seemed normal. And we left my daughter with his brother. And he told me to get dressed up, that he was going to show me out on the town. I had borrowed my friend's fake ID, pre-Jesus, don't judge me. And I was really excited to go to the clubs in Las Vegas. I mean, I'm from Cave Junction, so for me, it was like Vegas was like New York City. I mean, it was invigorating, and it was shocking, quite frankly. And I was excited. So I got dressed up, and instead of taking me to a nightclub, we drove to this dead-end street. And I'll never forget, there was this deserted strip mall on the right-hand side. No lights, no signs, just this big gray building. And he parked the car and he said, I spent a lot of money to get you here. I put first and last on the apartment. I filled the fridge with food. That was money I was using for my job. And I remember feeling really guilty. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I didn't know I'd put you out. Like I didn't know. And then I felt really naive, like I feel so stupid for being the girl that doesn't know how much it costs to move, because he said he was a little older, so there was some of that. And he said, well, I need you to go into this room, this door that has the camera above it, that's an escort service, and I need you to go in and sign up. I'm like, escort? That sounds like prostitution, no way. Like, no, it's not. That's not how it works here in Vegas. It's just dancing. This is how they send dancers to fancy suites with the bowling alleys and the pools and the basketball court. This is how it works here. You can trust me. I'm like, yeah, I'm from a small town, but I'm not that naive. Like, it still feels like it's not something I want to do. And that's when he slapped me across the face. And he said, you're going to go in that room and you're going to get my money back. And I can remember, obviously, being hit for the first time by someone that you love. And I remember literally thinking, well, we're adults now. Because my parents' fights were real violent. You've been desensitized to violence in the home. You tend to minimize it. Well, we're adults now. And then I remember thinking, I don't know where my baby is. I don't know my address by heart. I just got here yesterday. If I jumped out and called a cab, I literally wouldn't even know where to tell them to take me. And so I pushed every red flag aside, and I thought things will be better tomorrow. I'll just get the moving money back, and I'll get back to my daughter, and things will be better tomorrow. I'll be back to being hopeful and excited for this future that I had wanted for so long, that felt so within my grasp. And so if I just pushed the red flags aside and hoped that I could trust him, that I'd be back to being excited about this future and back to my daughter tomorrow. Things would be better tomorrow. Unfortunately, tomorrow did not come. And over the next 6 years, I ended up getting bought and sold between 3 different traffickers, 2 of which tattooed their names on my back. I was hospitalized for dehydration and overexhaustion. Some nights I was only given an hour to sleep. I have had my beaten almost weekly, had my face broken in 5 places, my palate cracked, my nose twice, my maxillofacials and turbinates impounded. I've been to jail multiple times, and by 21, I had tried to commit suicide twice. I just felt really hopeless. My mom had shown up to Vegas. She knew something was wrong. Something's going on. Are you on drugs? Are you a stripper? Something's wrong with Becky. That's what my family would say. I think nobody from a small town, especially that long ago, thinks human trafficking. It's not even a concept, right? Trafficking is kidnap kids overseas. My kid must be into something problematic, must be her choice, must be a decision she made. So my mom randomly shows up, takes my daughter, and that's when I had decided that I felt like I didn't have any reason to live if I didn't have anything to wake up for. And I tried to drive my car into a semi-truck. But thankfully, it didn't work. And I didn't really know how I was going to get out of it. I felt very trapped. I had multiple attempted escapes. Usually people say 6 years is a long time. Like, why didn't you just run? I'm like, I did run. Why do you think I'm standing here? I did run. Why didn't I run sooner? Why didn't I run some other time? Well, I had multiple attempted escapes. And I learned what to do each time one didn't work out. I learned where to hide clothes better for next time. I learned that post 9/11, you can't buy a plane ticket with cash, because I got all the way to the airport and no one would sell me a ticket. I learned that I needed to burn the receipts after I started wiring money to my mom, $50 here and there. I needed to start burning receipts, because if he found it in my car, like he did last time, then I'd be beaten unrecognizably. I started learning what to do with every attempt, how to navigate it better, differently this time and next time. And I learned that even when I did get out, all the way here to Grants Pass, that my trafficker flew into Medford Airport, stayed at the Country Inn Suites across, and came and found me. And I thought, I can't get out of this. I'm so afraid to tell anyone. I'm embarrassed of what I've done, and I'm afraid that they'll find me. And so I just stayed quiet and prayed. This was the house that my trafficker had met This is the house that my trafficker had in Denton, Texas, the one that was raided by the feds. What I didn't know was that when I had got recruited to join this crime family, they call it, that this house was under surveillance by local feds. The neighbor had a friend that worked in law enforcement, and the neighbors told the law enforcement officer at, I think, a Christmas party or something one day, they were like, I think my neighbors are drug dealers. And they're like, why do you think that, Barbara? I'm kidding. It's the new Karen, but I'm sure that no one here is named Barbara. Why do you think that? And they're like, well, it's a whole bunch of fancy cars and women. And so the cops were like, we'll look into it. And sure enough, came back that they were like, well, it's not drug dealers, but we actually think this might be what back then they call organized prostitution, right? Once again, language putting all of the onus on the victim, which I find interesting. So anyway, they turned it over to the feds. The feds started investigating. For 18 months, the feds surveillanced our trafficker and our legal businesses that we had purchased to launder money through. I'm trying to click the slides. I'm sorry. I'm not getting it, apparently. There we go. And so for 18 months, they would follow us to UPS, open doors for us. We didn't know that they were watching us. When the feds raided the home, this was some of the undercover surveillance. This was from the case file that we were able to retain after the investigation. This was inside the home. Very lavish kind of lifestyle, as they said. This was our house in Las Vegas, and this was one of the other trafficked victims. Oops, go back one, sorry. This was one of the other trafficked victims that I was trafficked with. She was forced to, pose. Any of the people in those advertisements are all trafficked victims. It looks like you're just watching an ad in a paper or something, and even the lady right at the front counter, the brunette, looks like they're getting a pizza, also trafficked victims. So everyone's required to play their part in making this legitimate pizza shop seem real, but really it was only to launder money through. Everyone got the same tattoos. This is how domestic trafficking works. And then this was the house in Vegas that me and my daughter and then the little boy lived in after the feds raided the home in 2006. He was sent to live with me in Las Vegas. When I arrived, my trafficker brought us to Disneyland. Go ahead and go to the next slide. My trafficker brought me and my daughter to Disneyland. This was when my daughter was, I think, in the 4th grade, as a reward for cooperation. I think sometimes when we think of trafficking or we think of people that are involved in the commercial sex industry by forced choice or circumstance, I think sometimes we can see lavish photos and we think, well, do some of them want to be there? Do some people want to be involved in this? Is this something that they're choosing? And the reason why I talk about some of this that's important is because traffickers use incentives to brainwash. It's not sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. It's all of it is a part of abuse. Think of how you would train a puppy. When you get a puppy and you want him to go outside, what do? You give him a treat and you tell him good job. How do you think traffickers train victims? You think if they just beat them all the time that they'll be compliant? They'd run a lot sooner. They'd be running all the time. Also, it's not a very sellable product, right? Like, let's be real, sex sells. Beaten up people handcuffed to a mattress isn't usually what most people find sexy. So how do I keep a product sellable and compliant? That's the goal. Well, guess what? If I give them rewards for cooperation and punishment for non-cooperation, it's a real quick way to get somebody brainwashed and get somebody trained on what to do and not to do. And so when we see sometimes outwardly the lavish innocence lifestyle or the travel or the trip to Disneyland, and we think, well, they must want to be there. Instead of thinking, I wonder if this is a part of the abuse. I wonder if this is a part of the training to keep them in compliance. Because when you're rewarded for following the rules, you want to keep doing that so that you don't keep getting hit. I want to keep doing what gets me treats or the night off or pizza at home with my daughter. I want to do that instead of doing what keeps getting me beaten or put in a hotel room and not allowed to come home because I didn't obey the rules. That's what you want to keep following. Brainwash is a systematic effort to destroy an individual's former loyalties and beliefs and replacing it with another form of ideologies. It's reinforced through brainwashing, social pressures, social ostracism, rewards for cooperation, sleep deprivation, food deprivation. This is the literal definition of brainwashing. And then it's when you see it contextually, when you hear people's stories, you're like, that was your everyday life every single day. Social ostracism, you don't get to come home. If you break the rules, you're gonna go you're gonna go to the local brothel, which is 20 days on, 10 days off. You don't obey the rules, you're going to the local brothel, you don't get to come home and see your kids. And you're sent out to the local brothel. We're on cameras the whole time. So these are the things that we don't see behind closed doors that are happening to victims. When the feds raided, they came with a warrant for the blonde girl. Her name is also Rebecca Dean, as you saw in the first video. They came only for an arrest warrant for her. That was the feds' goal. They thought she's the youngest. We're gonna come in and arrest one. We'll get her to flip, and then we'll take down the bad guys. That did not work out the way they thought. Becca had been being trafficked for 10 years at that time. She'd been trafficked since she was 17. She had a decade of trauma, brainwashing, and abuse. I teach law enforcement now to usually go after the victim that's been there the least amount of time, because we've had the least amount of trauma, least amount of time in the incestual, like prisoner of war style brainwashing, right? We've had less amount of time potentially as a shot. Hey, it's not always gonna work either, but we're like, let's try this as an alternative. And also oftentimes women with children, like try to talk to us before you just try to talk to someone who's been there so long, because I know, not everybody I know, but for me, I would have done anything to protect my daughter. I would have probably talked, but they didn't ask me. They never interviewed me, not one time. Go ahead and go to the next slide if we can play that jail clip.
Hello? Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're out there now, business girl, for real. I'm not crying right now. I'm miserable. Like, major love. Thank you for doing that, okay? Well, you guys are crying. Stop that. You guys are going to get stressed out and keep it going. Okay. You're on the phone all I can listen to that. Man, just saying something, you know. I just feel like you're being so hard for me. You want to know how I'm doing it. You know that. No, girl. It's all good. Just let you know how much I appreciate it. That's all. Oh, I love you. Okay, I love you. Hey, nothing. You so much. Don't even trip me. You're going to be back home in no time. Thank you. You know that much. I'm sure I got damn crying. No, I'm not sure, but, you know. I just want to know I appreciate it. Of course.
So some of the things to point out in this call was you can clearly hear the bond between the victims, right? Like we had been through so much together that sometimes when people ask, why don't you just run? It's like, I'm not just leaving one abusive person like intimate partner violence though. Like I'm leaving all of my best friends that have had my back for years. I'm leaving their children who became like my children. Like you're asking me to leave my whole community of people that have like meant a lot to me, that have literally helped me escape being locked in rooms with dangerous buyers who've had my back on the streets when you're getting jumped by other women. Like it's like this soldier at war style bond between us that you're like, well, why don't you just run? Like, it doesn't work like that. You have a lot of survivor guilt. You feel like, am I ever gonna see these people again? And so it takes a lot of effort to try to leave what you mapped to safety, right? We all map to harm or map to safety with our neurology. And what's interesting about mapping to safety is we forget that it's not just physical safety, but safety is community. That's how cavemen, stayed safe, as they all gathered together when the saber-tooth came. Like, community is safety. And so for us, in those moments, that has become safety. And so it's hard to just walk away from something that feels like that. We're just gonna go through this quickly for time. These are just some more of the surveillance photos. This was some of our mug shots from when we got taken in. Next slide. This is another jail call. One of the last jail call, also what I found interesting was I didn't know the third victim was listening in, and she was what's known as our bottom, which is the one who's been there the longest. Think of it like a bottom of a totem pole that's the start, and then everyone gets built on top from there. And I didn't know she was listening in, and she would regurgitate things that he would say, obviously at his demand. And but with him, he was so particular. Like, if you said he would be on the phone, he wouldn't want to be heard on jail calls in the beginning, and he would say, tell her I'm going to the store. And she'd say, he's going to the store. You could hear him like hit her. I didn't say going, I said going to. You say exactly what I said. So you're like having to be exactly repeating every single thing in the same diction, in the same voice fluctuation, whatever it is. You had to be exact. And so when she jumped on and said, stop all that crying, I immediately kind of panicked, like, oh, we're being listened to, got it. And so I felt like I pulled back a little because I didn't know what would be repeated. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide, or hit play.
Yeah, hang on real quick. Back to come.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're out there handling business, girl, for real. I'm about to start crying right now. I know. I got major love for you for doing that, okay? Thank you. Wait, what now? Don't you guys start crying. Stop that. You're acting like a mug and stressed out. Don't even go there. Oh, shit. Okay, you're on the phone. I'm like, who is that? Man, to say, Papa, this year in here would be so much harder for me if you weren't around doing that. You know that?
No, girl, it's all good.
But I'm just letting you know how much I appreciate it, that's all.
Oh, I love you.
Okay, I love you too.
Ain't nothing, girl. I love you so much. Don't even trip. You're gonna be back home in no time.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
I told you about that damn crying. Oh, shit, I know too, but, I just wanted to know I appreciate it. That's
of course. Act like you just got your head ready to go, girl. You're on vacation.
For time's sake, I'm going to go to the next slide. So you could hear, oops, would you hit pause?
While Becca's behind bars, she and Kevin talk almost daily.
You have to say nothing without your attorney present.
At all. Gotcha.
He was in my head, and I knew if I didn't say anything, then they didn't know anything. He said I'd be able to retire, and I was doing my part.
We didn't really want to prosecute Becca and anybody else involved with it. We wanted to get them out of it.
But Becca pays a price for her silence.
What happened as a result of this loyalty to him?
I wound up serving 13 months in federal prison and taking a plea deal to conspiracy to commit tax evasion.
So you can hear from the jail calls she's not being released on bail. She was denied bail by the judge. They'd found her with a fake ID on her and over $10,000 in cash. That's because she was trafficked as a minor. So our trafficker got her a fake ID and was putting her out in strip clubs and on the streets as a child, as a minor, and she would get arrested and taken to women's adult jail and booked under a completely fake name. And so for a long time, Mark and Andrew, the investigator and the U.S. attorney, they thought they were looking for a fifth victim. And then when they did the raid and brought her in and did her fingerprints, they said, "You're Nicole Wilson?" And they're like, "We've been looking for what we thought was the 5th victim." She's like, "No, that's been me." Basically, now they know that she was a minor at the time and he had bought her this fake ID. And so you can hear when she's getting denied bail over and over and over, you can hear kind of in that jail call the why and the reasoning. The judge just felt like she was too much of a flight risk, even though she owned a home. She was also renting one when he found her. Kind of goes with the story that the feds are providing the judge. The trafficker is trying to say, like, that doesn't have anything to do with anything, and it's so funny now knowing how law enforcement works. I'm like, wow, he was really dumb. Like, he was really, really dumb. He didn't know anything about the legal system. And there was no one there to help support her through the legal system either. And I can remember when we got the case and I was reviewing stuff and her and I were talking as we listened to some of the jail calls and review the evidence. And it hit me. I said, "Becca, every single thing like we hear, he keeps telling you next week, Monday. We'll see you on Monday. We'll do something on Monday." I'm like, "When did you realize like Monday wasn't coming?" And she said, "I didn't. The whole entire time, he kept saying, next week, next week, next week." And I was so crushed because we knew from day one that she wasn't getting out. We knew from day one that she was going to be denied bail as a flight risk. And it was so heartbreaking to hear that he would be lying to her all the time to keep her from talking. Meanwhile, we're getting, information from the lawyer that we knew she wasn't getting out. And so she served 13 months in federal prison, got out with a felony, $250,000 fine. Really hard barriers to reentry with life when you have all of the crimes that your trafficker has committed put on you. I got a failure to file charge because I had been in that crime family 3 years, and in order to be a prison sentencing, you have to be purposely evading 5 years or more. And because I didn't pay taxes for 3 years, I got a failure to file, which was an $80,000 fine, but no prison time. So I was able to run from my trafficker with $80,000 debt to the IRS, which means like garnishing your paychecks and never getting tax returns. And as a single mom, like those are pretty problematic to try to start over with a criminal record, getting a minimum wage job, only to have your checks garnished and all your tax returns taken. It's still prohibitive, right? I know it's not felony by any means, but these are always things traffickers do just to try to help make it harder. I remember when I ran, he put all the utilities in my social as soon as I left. And about a year after that, I was trying to move back to Grants Pass, and I was trying to rebuild my life, and I got my first apartment, and I went to turn on power and cable, and I had all this debt and this really bad credit. And I'm like, what? Like, when did I owe you that money? And they gave this, home address, and go to the next slide. They gave this home address and said, these years that you were at this address. And I'm like, I haven't lived there for over a year and a half. My trafficker would just put it all on my social and not pay on purpose to punish me. So just little things that make it really difficult for you to rebuild your life. All right, we're gonna go through a couple of these really quick for time's sake. Next slide. This is Becca and I today. The picture on the left was during Halloween. Our trafficker had us dress up like cowboys and Indians. I know, not culturally appropriate today. I am Choctaw. That's why my nickname was Pocahontas. That's why you heard on the voicemail them called me Poca. That was the street name that my trafficker gave me because I am Native. And so they called me Poke for a long time. I hadn't been called Rebecca for many, many years. And I can remember getting back here and being in a grocery store and someone like yelling my name. And I literally didn't even recognize it because I hadn't been called that for so long. And I just remember them coming up to me like, "I've been calling your name, you didn't hear me?" And that hit me like, I don't think I've been called Rebecca in a really long time. But anyway, this is us on the right. Fairly recently, maybe a year or two ago, Becca was given a presidential pardon for her felony. She's also a TEDx speaker and a trainer today. We're still very good friends. I'm so grateful, friends almost over 20 years now. We were able to lean on each other to get out and get through. And I'm so proud of the work that she's doing today. When I ran, go ahead and go to the next slide. When I ran, I fled to London, England. It's not the escape plan that we recommend by any means, but I was able to run off with a buyer because I was so afraid my trafficker was going to find me. And this regular of mine had been there for a long time, and so he said, "You can come to London with me and get out of the country if you want." And so I grabbed my daughter and I jumped on a plane to get out. I just wanted to be as far away as I could because I knew he had came back here to find me before, and so I just felt like I wasn't going to be safe. And it was really hard. I mean, my daughter did 5th grade in the UK, and again, not the escape plan or stabilization plan we recommend for victims to go live with a buyer by any means. But I will say that it was the first year that I could sleep through the night. The first year that I felt like I could eat without being nervous and sick. It felt like I was literally halfway across the world, that he was going to be really hard to get to me, and so I could sleep through the night again. And it's like I needed a little bit of time to let the dust settle. And thankfully, in February 22nd, 2009, I can remember starting to feel like it was time to go home, and so I got on a plane, and I came back to Grants Pass to sleep on couches, get on government housing, and get on food stamps. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Walmart or Dutch Bros seemed to be my only options in GP at the time, which are all fine jobs. They're great jobs, actually. But for me, it represented like, I don't really know what I'm going to do. Like it felt like I only had two options that I knew about. I mean, obviously, the city had changed since I'd been there in high school, but I just didn't know what I was good at. I didn't know if I was good at bookkeeping or photography. I didn't know if I liked projects or spreadsheets. Like I didn't know who I was. I wasn't able to explore who I was for a very long time. And so starting over was really, really hard. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We're going to go to next one. I think we were supposed to delete that one. Sorry, I told you up front my PowerPoint was not going to be totally ready because this was my first time sharing all of the videos with you. So I started to rebuild, and I got my first job at Chilhowie Motorcycle Leather, making custom saddlebags and tank bibs for Indian motorcycles and Harleys, and it was the only place that wouldn't do a background check that I could find, and so I was really excited about that. But I worked with a crew of 5 men, just me. I was in my 20s. And I can remember Chill was the owner. He kind of took me in as a mentor, and he said, hey, I want to move you to general manager, but we're going to need to work on some things. I can't have you dressing like that as the manager around these 5 motorcycle guys. And I didn't know. No one had ever taken the time to mentor me. He said, I want you to learn a new vocabulary word every single day. I want you to read this book on compound sentence structure, and I want you to spend 10 minutes every morning on the clock listening to the news and educating yourself about what's going on in the world. It's the first time I had a man not want anything in return from me, but just to pour into me as a mentor. And it radically changed my life. I was so grateful that the local entrepreneur had given this victim her first chance at a new opportunity. And I know there are many business owners in here today, and you know business owners. And so knowing that sometimes people just need one opportunity to rebuild. So I started trying to rebuild my life, and it was really, really hard. I'll be honest, the first 2 years were really hard. I got on food stamps and government housing, and then I got the general manager promotion, and I was so excited, thinking I'm doing this. But then it cut my food stamps down in half for only $50 more a month, and I thought, how do people do this? How do you navigate poverty? How do you navigate gaining in the job market, but then losing all of your state benefits, so you're actually making less by doing more? It was so topsy-turvy, and it was really hard. And at that time, I ended up getting married. I'm now divorced, but I got married at the time, and I had 3 more beautiful daughters. These are my 4 little girls that you can see here. I didn't want girls. I got all girls. I don't know how that happens. I didn't want them to turn out like me, was what I was afraid of. Until recently, a few years ago, I had this revelation that I thought, I like the woman that I've become. If they turn out like me, they're going to be okay. Took a long time to get there, but I'm glad today. And then usually people ask, where's your daughter at today? Is she okay? So I just started beating everyone to the punch and adding a slide in about where she's at today. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is my daughter today. She is, thank you. I'm very proud of her. She was 7 when the feds came, and I threw her over the fence into the neighbor's backyard. And now she is a Berkeley graduate, business from the Haas School. She is the 2nd fastest female in Oregon's history since 1942. She's broke 25 records in our state of Oregon. She got a scholarship to Cal with a business degree. She had a year of eligibility because of COVID. Texas A&M offered her a 2-year full ride for 1 year of running. She went to Texas, finished her master's degree in public policy and administration. She graduated last year, signed pro. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And she will be at Olympic trials in Eugene this June. So Obviously, I'm so proud as a mom, as we all are with our kids. But sometimes when I look at her and I think, gosh, what she's lived through, the moments that she's seen me beaten and battered, and the moments when she's been pulled out from her bed in the middle of the night and saying, we'll get more when we get to Nana's, just grab her favorite toy. The moment when I'm throwing her out windows, throwing her out fences, changing schools every single year so that no one would know where we lived. I'm just so grateful for what she's doing today, for her resilience, for her strength. We got to speak together for the first time at Texas A&M last month, and it was really powerful for me. She hated every minute of it. She was like, I am never doing this again. I hate public speaking. But she did really good. Okay, next slide. This is a little bit of what, we ended up doing some things. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I just want to share a little bit more about. So we started a nonprofit about 10 years ago called the Rebecca Bender Initiative. It's not because I'm arrogant. I literally could not think of anything, okay? I was like, we'll just call it me and we'll change every year that we figure out what we're doing here because we had no clue what we were going to do. I'm like, I don't know what we're doing, but we're doing something. I just want to sound the alarm and tell people that trafficking is happening in every community across the country. It was not just kidnapping overseas, that it was happening right here in Eugene, Oregon, in Grants Pass, in Ashland, and Medford. It was happening everywhere. And so that was my goal originally, was just to kind of sound the alarm. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And we started 2 programs. We had Equip, which was where we trained first responders on how to identify and respond to exploitation. And I wanted to not just tell a sob story, but I wanted there to be some kind of call to action. And so when I reviewed my timeline, I wrote it down on a piece of paper, literally drew a line across a couple computer papers I taped together on my kitchen table. And as I looked at it, I thought, well, I've been to jail a lot. Maybe I could teach cops what to do better. It was kind of where it started for me. Because, everyone all traffic victims have a story to tell. Even though we have similar recruitment and grooming styles and tactics, there's still a lot of uniqueness. Some traffic victims' vulnerabilities come from a home of substance abuse, a home with mental health, a home with foster care interaction. And so a lot of their lived experience could be assisting the child welfare system on helping with case file management and prevention efforts. And how do you do better with fostering trafficked youth that come into the foster care system, right? There can be this whole component. And then there's, all sorts of ways, whether you interacted with medical, how many times you went to the hospital or you got an exam done, how can we assist in trauma-informed interviewing and response? So there's all sorts of ways that we can use our lived experiences to help inform different policies and practices and trainings. And so that's what we kind of wanted to try to do. And so as I tried to do that with my own life, we did it for about 2 years, and then we started having survivors reach out and we're like, hey, how'd you do that? How did you come up with the theme and find your specialty, and how'd you get contracts, and what happens on April 15th with taxes, and how much did you charge, and is that a going rate, and all these questions. And at the time I was finishing my master's degree, and I remember thinking, if I could get a master's online, I could mentor online. And I'm not the only survivor who lives in a community where services don't exist. And so I looked at the technology that my school was using. It was called Moodle, and I thought, I wonder how much Moodle is. It was free. Thank you, Moodle. So I started an online school. Wrote a 16-week curriculum, launched it online. We started with 5. Robin was in my first group of 5 8 years ago. And now we have had over 1,600 survivors go through our online school. So grateful, spanning 600 U.S. cities and 22 countries. And Elevate has just been a small part in their journey, I know, very small part. And whatever classes they took that benefited them, and hopefully gained some insight, whether it's just what do I charge or how do I put a contract together, that's fine. But we really wanted survivors to have seats in the table in every community across the country. We knew that lived experience mattered. It helped inform the way we do things in our communities. And so many survivors have so many different lived experiences, far beyond just the exploitation, right? All of the systems that they had interacted with pre, during, and post are all systems that needed more insight and ideas on how difficult or easy it was to navigate some of those systems. And so we really wanted to try to find a way to help survivors find those seats. And so really quickly, I'm just going to share 2 things about trafficking for our Equip side that I always find interesting. Most people don't know this. Trafficking is obviously what we know is the use of force, fraud, or coercion. But the Palermo Protocol, which was passed by United Nations in 2000, also creates this thing called acts means purpose. So usually when you're thinking of trafficking, you're gonna either hear stories, but you're thinking like, well, how is that trafficking? Like, I think when Amanda Berry was able to exit the room when she was kidnapped, I would get phone calls all the time. Oh my gosh, did you hear about that trafficked girl? And I'm like, was there a commercial exchange? Oh, no. Horrible what she went through. Would never want that on anybody. Horrible. I don't know trafficking. I don't know. There's no commercial element involved. So sometimes I find that as trafficking gets on the rise, people are stamping every single thing as trafficking. And we gotta be careful because proper diagnosis leads to proper treatment. We wanna be able to get people the real services that they need and the real systems that they need. We wouldn't put a broken arm in a sling and send somebody home. We get them into a specialist, surgery, physical therapy, right? Like proper diagnosis leads to proper treatment. So we really need to know. And so the act of transporting, harboring, obtaining, recruiting, providing, soliciting, patronizing or maintaining is the act. So if anyone does that, what does that mean? Well, did you pick them up from the Greyhound bus? Did you purchase the hotel that they stayed in that night? Did you put the ad on the internet? Did you, right? So when you're hearing stories, you can kind of see transported, harbored, solicited, all of these types of things. And this gets added to every couple years in the Trafficking Victims Reauthorization Act. Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act. It's long, the TVPRA. So this gets added to. About 2008, there was only like 3 of these bullet points. So people were not, patronizing wasn't on there. So you were seeing people who were buying human trafficking. I know we're going to talk a lot about demand. You were seeing them getting slaps on the wrist and like, compelling prostitution, and they just send them home. Until we started really getting more in the nitty gritty with making sure to get some of these soliciting, patronizing in our laws, because that means that whether it's a buyer or a seller, now both of you can get one human trafficking charge, which I think is interesting for the general public to know, because when we see news releases that are coming out and we're like, 33 traffickers in Rogue River, where have I been? You're like, calm down. Yes, it's awful. Undercover operations out of our task force did this op, and 33 men tried to buy a child in your community. That's awful. You should know about that. You should know who they are. But all of it's going to be one trafficking charge now. So it's just important to kind of know what to look for. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then these are some of the most, one back. I think I clicked and you clicked. Now my clicker's working. These are the most common 6 types of exploitation in different communities. I don't know what do you guys think is the most common here in Southern Oregon? Do you want to just yell out some thoughts? Survival exploitation? Familial? Anyone else? Some gang trafficking? Yeah, I would agree with all those. I think familial trafficking is probably very prominent here, and we're seeing a lot of child welfare workers not know what sometimes the difference is. And I'm really grateful that our DOJ has a CSEC coordinator, and our state has actually done quite a bit to try to advance education for our child welfare system so that we can identify familial traffic victims sooner. I definitely think a lot of survival exploitation is happening here with our homeless population, homeless youth population. I know that's not the phrase, but sorry, I'm tongue-tied and I'm short on time and panicking in my mind. I don't think we have a ton of cantinas here, to be really honest. But we do have a lot of illicit massage parlors here, and there's been several that have been being investigated. So it's just things to keep an eye out, kind of get to know more about, because trafficking looks really different based on the culture and community in which you live, right? Trafficking looks really different. How it looks in the karaoke bars in Cambodia is going to be very different than the streets of Brooklyn, than online tech in Seattle, than here in Southern Oregon. Traffickers look really different based on the culture and the community in which you live, but trafficking's everywhere. Traffickers exploit vulnerable people, and vulnerable people exist everywhere. So it's just kind of learning about your area, who's vulnerable here, what type of recruitment tactics and grooming tactics might be used with that population, and then that's how we can identify the system to support the needs and vulnerabilities in our community. Okay, last slide, we're almost done, I know. And then we have Elevate Academy. Like I said, next slide, Elevate has almost 1,600 students. And so I will give my small shameless plug that if you want to sponsor a survivor, we really could use your help. $19 a month for a 1-year commitment really helps us put a survivor through school. We really could use your help. It is so hard to run a nonprofit. It's really hard, and I didn't get in this work to be a full-time fundraiser, and yet as the founder, apparently I am. And it was not always why I wanted to do this. Really wanted to help other women like me. I wanted to train professionals and systems that I had I had had to navigate, sometimes poorly. I didn't know that as the founder, I would be constantly raising money. And I'm not great at it. I'll just be very honest, I'm not great at it. So we need your help. We would love to have some people that are offering to give $20 a month to help put a survivor through school. So if that's something you're interested, obviously we have the QR code up here. We also have our table in the back. Melanie, will you raise your hand? That's our table back there. All sorts of brochures about Elevate and what we do. If you'd like to consider learning more about our school or sponsoring our survivor, please feel free to stop there and get your little bingo tickets so that you can be insured in the grand prize raffle. So thank you. And I'm going to end with this video of the follow-up from 2017. So 2006 to is that 11 years? I'm so bad at math, clearly. 11 years later, the same CBS does a follow-up about that story they aired. And I just want to show you the difference and the growth that advocacy and awareness makes, whether you're working with systems or law enforcement or media. It's all of us doing our part to really move the needle forward on this issue. So thank you for being here today, and I'm going to close with this video.
Brainwashed and battered into submission. Tonight, meet the women who survived a living hell.
CBS 11 I-Team's Ginger Allen is here to take us inside this terrifying world of human trafficking. Ginger?
You know, almost 12 years ago, the I-Team uncovered details about a secret prostitution ring. It was operating out of a very unusual place, this upscale neighborhood in Denton. Now, more than a decade later, we are learning new, even more disturbing details about the biggest secret of all, what was really happening inside that home.
I'm gonna cry.
I know, me too. Wilson. It was tough for these women to watch this I-Team investigation, which first aired in May 2006. At the time, Becca Bender was 25 and Rebecca Charleston was 24.
And I remember when this came out, I was in prison.
Our story aired just after Charleston and another woman were found guilty of money laundering and tax evasion, all part of a massive, high-dollar prostitution ring operating at this home in Denton. This is where Charleston lived with their pimp and some of the other women. Bender lived at their other home in Vegas.
It was hard seeing the other women and knowing what was really happening.
Particularly hard because more than a decade later, these women tell the I-Team what was happening inside this home was not at all what it seemed.
We all had to call each other sisters.
Yeah, we were required to call each other sisters.
Required? There were rules and laws?
Oh, a whole bunch of rules. If you didn't obey the rules, you'd be beaten.
Instead of criminals, these women say they were victims, lured into this lifestyle, brainwashed and beaten if they did not follow orders. And the two men who put them behind bars say that's exactly what was happening.
Our focus was on the pimp.
Mark Parsons was the IRS investigator who followed them all over the country.
They suffered physical and emotional control.
Andrew Stover is the U.S. attorney who prosecuted them.
We were really, in many ways, hoping to get you out of it.
The investigators say they hoped by arresting the women, they'd get to the real criminal, the man who was trafficking them. The women say they were too afraid to give him up.
See the fish?
Looking at pictures taken during the raid of that Denton home, the koi pond built into the theater floor, the murals in the garage.
There's actually a TV in that mirror.
The elaborate decor and high-dollar cars, the women talk more about those house rules.
We would have been beaten for not making that bed.
Yeah. So this is a...
All right, I'm just going to stop for time's sake.
Brainwashed and battered.
Next slide. Yeah. There's our contact info. You can see quite the difference they made. They blurred out victims' faces. They used a little bit better language. And I'm actually really grateful that Andrew Stover and Mark Parsons, they do a lot of trainings today on what they wish they would have done different. And I think that's really powerful to see law enforcement openly say, in 2006, we were not being taught this. And here's all of the mistakes we made. And it's been really awesome to have them as partners training other people on how to do it different. So with that being said, thank you so much for letting me come back to my community. I love it here.